The title of this podcast is Life Became Better When I Stopped Making It All Up. Man, this is so true. I remember that when I suffered a lot in my life, which was majority of my life. I mean, there were some occasional moments in which life lined up exactly toward my to my expectations, but if I was to go back and really be able to objectively like calculate and total up the number of times that happened, it was few and far between. So I suffered a lot, didn't know I was suffering, but I suffered quite a bit. And had no idea that there was a different way to move through life. Like what would happen if I stopped making it all up? And this was everything. Snowboarding trips I would make up without, I wasn't conscious of it, but I was making up of how it had to be perfect for me to have a great experience, like what it needed to be like, from the flight, the cost of the flight, the cost of lodging, uh, the smoothness of the flight without cancellations or delays. When I got to the resort, uh, was a resort completely free of people with the exception of my five friends and me. And it had to be powder. Like I put a lot of expectations on the way things need to be, and I was just making it all up. The same thing happened with my friendships. I expected them to treat me a certain way without telling them about, agreeing about how we were going to treat each other. I expected them to remember things or include me in things, and that they may have not thought to include me in, or know that, hey, like, why would we invite Keith out to a bar? He doesn't drink. Like, why would we do that? And me being bothered because I felt would make up, you should consider me anyway. Let me have the opportunity to say no. And the list just goes on and on. Work is another area in which I was making it all up about how the workday was going to play out or what the job was going to be or how my manager or boss was going to supervise me, just making it all up. And it was just all suffering. It all resulted in some level of suffering for me. And there is completely a different way to move through life. And the way that, I learned to start with was just taking every little thing that bothered me and just kind of understanding that I want to be able to handle this because it's likely that I'm going to see it again. The weather in Arizona is a good one. If you live somewhere to where the winters are long and you have a problem with the winters, that's a great place to practice. Stop making up what the weather should be like in the wintertime. This is where you live and this is what the weather is like, so learn how to handle it. In Arizona in the summertime, the temperatures are going to be triple digits. Like, accept it, don't make it a problem, and you'll be fine. Because all you're doing is making it up anyway. And that is in stark contrast of what the reality of the weather is like wherever you are. Um, and I just really learned how to just change what my intention was. It was to not mindlessly make things up. Well, first of all, it was to be aware that I'm mindlessly making things up. Then it was to cease and desist from that kind of behavior, and then became like helping and serving others. And I started to become other oriented. That changed everything. I stopped making a lot of things up. But there were a few things that were still making up and helping other people. And one of those things were I became clear that a tiny part of me, but it was a significant part, although it was tiny, was attached to how people would receive my act of kindness or my service. If I felt like they didn't thank me for it, and they didn't have to throw a party for me to thank me or announce it to other people, but they just didn't give me a little thank you, then it bothered me. It hit something inside. And because I was making up like how they should respond in terms of gratitude for whatever the act of kindness was. And so I learned to be aware that it wasn't them, it was me. And that if I'm going to give, then learn how to give unconditionally. So I started to learn how to give unconditionally. And I also made it a point to do quite a few other things, which were to um, to really intentionally um, be open to how life would unfold, which wasn't an easy thing because Keith 1.0, 2.0 now, but Keith 1.0 likes to be in control. And there's just so little in life that one can be in control of. And I also learned that if I want to have life be a certain way, that the best chance of doing that is to focus on the things that are within my control. And if I do those things well, then it will open up a lot of possibilities of how I can interact with reality when it does show up a certain way. And one of my good friends, who is a doctor at Mayo Clinic, her name is Harini Shakira, and she told me about her family's focus on education when she was growing up, that they put a huge focus on it. And her parents gave her and her brother some advice when they complained about, how daunting work was, particularly in med school. And but they kept telling them that if you put the work in now and stop complaining about this privilege that you have, is going to open up a lot of doors. Like, accept the reality that med school just comes with a lot of work. So does residency and fellowship. But if you do, you're going to have the gift to work at some pretty special places. And what's how people define special is up to them. And then it's going to give you the opportunity to provide some pretty incredible care. And if you end up working at a place like, let's say in her case, Mayo Clinic, then the name Mayo Clinic alone will open doors for you without people knowing much about you. And it certainly has done that for me. And when I look over the course of my life, as I've dedicated myself to this practice of working on me before I even consider working on anyone else or a situation, what's been true is that if I do that important work, which includes not making things up about the way that they should be or people should be, if I can do that, if I can, work on self-mastery, it's going to open a lot of doors and it's going to reduce a lot of suffering in my life. Because I did not make that the priority in my life, I suffered a lot because I just kept making up the way things should be. Now, for people having events that are going to be unfolding in their life, whether it is the kids are leaving, to move on with their independence or going off to college or moving out of your home, or if you're welcoming kids to your home, or you're going through a life transition with your significant other, or it could be a health challenge, whatever the case may be, resist the urge to make up the way that it should be. Just be open to whatever happens. Remember, you want to be turned on no matter how life unfolds. You don't want to live a conditional life that it has to be a certain way, that my significant other has to be this way, or that my children have to be that way. You want to be like, when it comes to my significant other, however they show up, I want to be turned on. When it comes to whether our relationship, goes on till we both, pass away, at the same time, or if our relationship sunsets and we've had a good run, just be cool with all of that, because you're living an unconditional life. And the way to be unconditional about it is to begin by stop making it all up and just be with reality and learn how to handle whatever shows up. If you can do that, you will have a great experience. I used to marvel at how, when I was ultra competitive and only was consumed with winning, how people who didn't win would act like it was no big deal that they didn't win and they were still having fun. Like, how's that possible? You only have fun when you're winning. That's true if you're playing a conditional game. You only have fun then, but you can't win all the time. But you can certainly have fun all the time if you set your intention to a higher goal, to a higher standard. And for me, that is to stop making it up and ask myself, why am I not having a good time right now? It's because I made up the way that it should be. And if I stop doing that, man, I silence the personal Keith 1.0, and then I have beautiful experiences. I hope you will consider The next time your mind starts to make things up, to tell it to stand down. It's not good at that job. It's pretty poor at that job. You get back in the driver's seat and you start to say, whatever this is that's unfolding in front of me is an opportunity for me to practice self-mastery so that I have a good time and I reduce suffering.